Ooh, I like your necklace. Very Hawaiian.
That's where it's from.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you for sending out the minutes to us so fast.
Oh, you bet.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I will call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. This is the City of Tiger Planning Commission public meeting. Today is November 29th, 2021. Doreen, may we have a roll call, please? Here.
Vice President Jackson,
Present.
Commissioner Brooke,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Dick,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Miranda,
Present.
Commissioner Quinones, Commissioner Roberts,
Here.
Commissioner Shook,
I'm here.
Commissioner K7,
I'm here too.
Commissioner Watson. Looks like she's just coming in. Commissioner Watson,
Here.
Commissioner Whitehurst, Commissioner Whitehurst. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen.
Mhm.
Next item on the agenda is communications. Any commissioner, do you want to report any communication, any meetings you attended since our last meeting? I see none, so let's go on to consideration minutes. Doreen sent out draft minutes for November 15th meeting, and she sent me another version not too long ago, adding another question and answer to our meeting regarding whether businesses in the Washington Square Regional Center will be exempt from our city's public nuisance regulation, and the answer was no. So that was the only thing added to the version last week. So, Commissioner, do you have any more additions, deletions, or corrections you wish to share? Okay, I see none, so I declare the minutes from November 15th approved. Thank you, everyone. All right, so let's move on to the meeting, the hearing for this evening. It's a quasi-judicial hearing and regarding Universal Plaza and Path, and it's a comprehensive plan amendment, CPA 2021-4, and sensitive land review, SLR 2021-10, and the City of Tiger is proposing to construct Universal Plaza and a connecting multi-use path from the plaza to the nearby Fennel Creek Trail. A Type 3 modified comprehensive plan amendment is required to approve the removal of Gold 5 protection from 0.004 acres of wetland from the local wetland inventory and to remove 0.24 acres of associated buffer to accommodate the proposed plaza elements and path within sensitive lands. So before we go on with the meeting, there are some statements I need to read. Well, first of all, if for the member of the public, if you wish to provide public testimony after the staff presentation, the calling number is 503 966-4101. Again, the number is 503-966-4101. So the request statements are as follows. The applicable approval criteria are those listed on page 1 of the staff report, available at the City of Tiger website under the public hearing section. Number 2, testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable approval criteria listed on page 1 of the staff report, or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation that are believed to apply to the decision. Number 3, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Here are some procedure items. Commissioners, do you wish to abstain or declare a conflict interest? Please raise your hand if you do. I see none. Does anyone in the audience wish to challenge any member of the Planning Commission for bias or conflict of interest? If you wish to make such a challenge, please state so when you call in during the public testimony session. Second part is ex parte contacts. Commissioners, do you wish to report any ex parte contact? That is any oral or written communication about the hearing with persons other than city staff or the city attorney. I see none. Has any commission member visited the site of the proposal? If you do, if you have visited the site, please raise your hand so I can read it out. Okay, I have Commissioner Dick, Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Miranda. Anybody else?
This is Commissioner Roberts. I visited, but it's been quite some time, like that general area about 8-9 months ago.
Okay, that's a yes, I guess.
Okay.
And Commissioner who? That's it. Okay, please lower your hand. Thank you. So does anyone in the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the commission? Again, if you do, please state so when you call in. So here's the description of the hearing process. First, the staff will give their staff report. Well, I guess staff and applicant are the same, so there won't be any additional applicant presentation. After that, we will take public testimony. And if you would like to speak, please call in at 503-966-4101. So I would like to introduce staff member, Associate Planner Monica Belladu, to present the staff report. Hi, Tom.
Good evening. Sorry to interrupt, but
No problem.
I'm going to interrupt Monica's presentation very briefly to let everyone know that unfortunately this is Monica's last night with the City of Tigard. She's moving on to accept a senior planner position, and we wish her all the best, but we're really going to miss Monica. I know that she's been to Planning Commission many times, so just wanted to let you all know that to say goodbye to Monica and thank you.
And
Sorry, Monica, I didn't tell you I was going to do that, but you can get on.
congratulations too.
Surprise me.
Well,
All
we'll
right,
say our
we
goodbyes
open-
later, but go ahead, Monica. Good evening.
Okay, thank you. Second, it's opening. There we go. All right. Good evening, President Hu. My name is Monica Bilodeau, Associate Planner with the City of Tigard for one more night. The item before you tonight is the Universal Plaza Comprehensive Plan Amendment and Sensitive Lands Review. So the project summary, and just to be clear, to clarify, the city is processing this, but I will have the applicant, who is also the city, and they have a short presentation available too for commissioners. So quick project summary, the City of Tigard is requesting a comprehensive plan amendment to remove 0.194 acres of Tigard significant wetlands from the Wetlands and Stream Corridor map. And then also to clarify that further, on page 5 of the staff report, we have it broken down further into permanent impacts to the wetland, which is only the 0.004. So the only impacts to wetland is that 0.004, which is about 159 square feet. And that's proposed to be mitigated at a Butler mitigation bank, which is in our local area, in our watershed in Washington County. And that is requiring some purchase of mitigation bank credits. The rest of the impacts, the 0.19, is to the vegetated corridor. So just to clarify kind of what impacts are being proposed there. I'll move on. This is an aerial of the site, and as you can see, there's already some painting on the ground. That's kind of the outline of the Universal Plaza site there. And as you can see down below, you can see the meandering of the Fano Creek and the trail connection, and then leading up to kind of Ash Avenue there. So our proposed impacts is in the corner there, and here are some additional figures that were also provided to you, so you can see the connection that is being proposed, and where the impacts are taking place are kind of at the corner of the site there. And we have reduced, and I think I have the most current figures where we've reduced the width of the trail to that 10 feet wide section of the trail there. So a summary of the project need. This is a multi-use trail connection to the existing Fano Creek from the proposed Universal Plaza, which is proposed to be a public gathering space. Additional improvements will come later on with that proposal that is separate from this application. But we did determine that this is, critical infrastructure that will serve a dual purpose in fulfilling both the public transportation and recreation needs. And it will also include some interactive learning components. The new path section will provide for more of a controlled access. From that Universal Plaza site, you will be able to see the Fano Creek and the trail. And then this path, this controlled access, will be able to allow pedestrians to access the trail in a very designated way, thereby reducing kind of the introduction of kind of rogue paths, which we've seen along Fano Creek and are common kind of in that area. So as part of the comprehensive plan amendment, we require that an Esee analysis be done, and that looks at the environmental, the economic, energy, and social impacts of basically the trade-offs if we allow this to take place and to take, impact these wetlands. What are the trade-offs that we get associated with it? So that analysis was provided to you, and ultimately the evaluation looked at allowing, limiting, and completely prohibiting. And it looked at kind of all the impacts associated with that. And it concluded that limiting the conflicting use would result in the most beneficial consequences of the three protection scenarios. So limiting in it as, we didn't just outright let the trail go through the wetland. It was designed in a way that limited the impacts to that wetland and kind of gave a trade-off there. That analysis was included in the packet to you as well. So ultimately, staff is here tonight for a recommendation from you to City Council at the January 4th hearing for approval of the Comprehensive Plan Amendment and the Sensitive Lands Review, and that's subject to all the findings and recommended conditions in the staff report. So that concludes staff's presentation, but we do have the applicant that we can give a history as well and can do a little presentation, and staff, multiple staff will be here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Monica. Would you prefer we hold off to our question till the city presentation, or can we ask you questions right now?
I think normal protocol, you can ask staff any questions that you have, and then anything potentially I can't answer, or maybe the applicant can add on to, we can also wait for their presentation. Okay, so commissioners, do you have any question for Monica at this point? And please, if you can, please keep your question, please keep the opinions to yourself at this point. Just a question, if you can. I know it's hard to separate opinion with questions sometimes, but if you can not express your opinion about this case at this point, I appreciate it. All right, Commissioner Dick, please go ahead.
So I have a question about the bank of credits. What makes up the bank of credits, and how many credits are left for all these trade-offs? That's my question.
Yeah, so when impacts are proposed to wetlands, in order to basically ensure that there's no loss of wetlands, the applicant buys wetland mitigation credits in a mitigation bank. In this case, they've proposed to buy mitigation credit in the Butler Mitigation Bank. And the applicant can speak to potentially more details about this bank. But I know it is widely used as a wetland mitigation bank. CWS has accepted this as an acceptable mitigation proposal. And again, the only credits that they would need to buy is for the impacts to 159 square feet. So that's the only impacts that are taking place to the actual wetlands. CWS has worked with the applicant, and they've come up with kind of a robust mitigation plan of restoration and restoration and mitigation on and near the site in Fano Creek. So they'll be doing a lot of creation. They're going to be ripping out in some areas like asphalt and restoring it, because this is a very impacted kind of area. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Brooke? Commissioner Brooke, you have a question?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, sorry, I was trying to connect to headphones and it was telling me my mic wasn't working. Sorry about that. My question is, so I'm trying to understand the difference between like the sections that, like if you put in a slab of concrete, obviously that's like completely removing that element of the wetlands. But if you're putting like a walkway, like the trail is elevated, like some sort of small bridge, that seems to have less of an impact. So I guess I'm just curious if you could show us your the graphic that showed which area was going to be affected and if any of that is elevated or if it's all going to be paved through the wetlands. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll comment quickly and then I'll probably let the applicant potentially show some additional figures, but I can pull those up as well. But ultimately this is going to be a raised boardwalk, so it's the footings that are impacting the wetland. So they have erred on the side of caution when they did kind of those impact calculations and worked with CWS on that. So the map is a little deceiving where it points to wetland impacts, but it's just the footing area because the rest of the board, it is not impacting. So it's kind of those footing areas that we're counting as impacting the wetland.
Gotcha. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica, is the company that prepared the ESEE consequence analysis available to answer question? Pacific Habitat Services? They're not here, I guess.
I'll have to refer to Gary, which is technically the applicant. I don't know if they were included. I know they're probably listening or can call in, but I don't know if they're on. It doesn't look like they're on this.
Okay, so I would try to ask some question. If you don't know, I can ask Gary or somebody else to answer. So the ESEE analysis point out there may be accessibility issue associated with the existing sidewalks between Universal Plaza and Fennel Creek Trails. Can you point out what those accessibility issues are?
Hi, President Hu. This is Gary Pagenstecker.
Hi, Gary.
It's nice to see you all, commissioners. So I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but the part of the rationale for the path to be placed there is that the alternative was a roundabout way using Ash Street sidewalks and Burnham Street to get from Fano Creek Trail. Is that sort of in the neighborhood of what you're asking about? And
yeah, the report says there are accessibility issues. I walked there today, and if I were on a wheelchair, I would have no problem with those pathway right now. So I'm just wondering what the accessibility issues are that was talking about in the report, in the analysis.
Can you? I have it here. I can refer. If you've referred me to the page number, maybe I can get to the point. Otherwise, my recollection is that the purpose of the trail is to create an avenue for appreciation of Fano Creek. So in the direction of the creek, where we would expect demand trails, desire line trails, if that proposed pathway wasn't provided, and that to rely on the Ash Creek and Burnham sidewalks would be insufficient. So in terms of the ADA or the accessibility, I'm not exactly sure what the ESE narrative is getting at, unless you can read more from it or give me a page citation.
Page 6, on the first full paragraph at the end. The only other pedestrian or bicycle option to connect the Universal Plaza to the Fennel Creek Trail are on the public sidewalks or street routes along Burnham Street and Ash Street, which are indirect and may not be easily accessible to people with limited mobility. So I'm just wondering, where did they get a conclusion that it may not be easily accessible to people with limited mobility?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not exactly sure I think this was Well,
What
the author.
the entire foundation for removing the wetland from the protected area is based on this ESS analysis. So I just have lots of questions with this analysis. And I know we're not supposed to express our opinion right now, but I just found it to be, the analysis is being very superficial. And I don't find a lot of supporting evidence for the ESS analysis. So so that's a lot of my question are pointing to the ESE analysis. So because this is the only reason we can remove the protection. So if it's not convincing to me, I would not be able to support the removal of wetland. So anyway,
all right,
so
I appreciate that. And the one thing I would add then is that limited mobility, may be amount of effort it takes to go a distance, not whether or not it's flat the whole way. And
so what's the distance difference between the direct path and the current, roundabout way go around the printing company? So what's the distance difference? 100 feet?
Well, if you're in the plaza, then as soon as you set out on the trail, you are in the resource and can appreciate the creek in a matter of 10, 20, or 30 feet. If you had to take Burnham and Ash, you'd be going for, a large city block. The length of two sides of a large city block to get to the approximation of where you would otherwise have been with not so much effort. So I think it has to do with ease of access, both in terms of length and keeping in mind those the most vulnerable among us.
Okay. Okay, the second question is that have there been discussion with the printing company next door regarding a public easement through their parking lot for the proposed trail?
And Sean may want to weigh in at this point, since Sean is the applicant and has a lot of the history and tangential information that wasn't part of the application that he can report on, that element in particular. But they were approached and they declined, as far as I remember.
How about
this is Sean. That's correct. They're not interested in this time in having a public easement across their parking lot.
Okay, so how about the wetland area next to their parking lot, immediately adjacent to their parking lot? Would that?
What's the question? I'm sorry, if it's to me.
So my question is, how about the public wetland next to their parking lot, like immediately adjacent to their parking lot? Would that be less of an impact on the wetland than what the current proposal is? Like, since their parking lot is already paved, so if you just attach to their parking lot another pathway, would that be less of an impact on the wetland? And the
if they were permitting it, if they would have permitted it, it would have been. The alignment cuts the corner right at their property line. As you can see, the curve is around the property corner. So the path goes over the wetland just enough to get further along, not going on the B&B printing site.
I guess I need to take a look at a map later, if you can put that out later. But I think that's all the questions I have right now. Commissioner, do you have any more questions for Monica before the city presentation? Go ahead, Commissioner Miranda.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to confirm that the 159 square feet is each individual piling, and then those combined equals 159. So there's not like extra water underneath there or wetland underneath there that's included. So it's the 5 or 6 pilings that are in the area is 159 square feet. Am I understanding that math correctly?
Yeah, Monica, I might be able to answer that. Yeah, that area is about the size of what, 5 sheets of plywood, and together represent, I think, the 18 or the number of concrete beams that are shown in the drawing within the wetland. But the total, I think, is for all the piers, all of the beams. I think there's 18 that are proposed for the length of the boardwalk.
But it is not
So let me also
underneath
go ahead.
underneath part. Okay.
Right. Just the displacement in the ground of the footing that would be holding the substructure up. And what they're shown in the drawings as concrete beams, the width of the boardwalk, space at certain spacings, 10 feet or something like that. And at the time that we were doing the design development, we hadn't gotten the geotech report, so we didn't know what kind of sub-support there would need to be. And subsequent to that, we've learned that helix piers can be used, which have a very light footprint. And so that the amount of impact in the service provider letter is more than we will actually be creating with this alternative foundation.
Okay. My next question, I believe, is to you, Monica. In the staff report, there were several agencies who didn't respond, and I wanted to know if that was common, and if they had responded, would those responses hold any weight in this discussion?
So we do have a request for comment process, and we sent out requests. We did not hear in some of those cases, but they did do the applicant, before the application was submitted, they did do a wetland delineation, and that has to reach out to these agencies as well, and then going through Clean Water Services. So there has been some outreach to these agencies prior to the application. And then once the application is submitted, we send again, kind of notice that a land use has been submitted, but we did not get any comments. We do receive the comments and we look at them. Obviously, if something is brought to light or brought to our attention, we would go immediately to the applicant and say, hey, you know what, yeah, so anytime we do get, you know, additional information during our public outreach or our request for comment phase, we do try to see if we can incorporate any changes or anything needed as part of the process.
And was that request given in a standard amount of time for them to respond?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
The remainder of my questions are pretty specific to stormwater mitigation and the revegetation of the previous mitigations, and I'm not entirely sure if listening to the applicant's presentation would be more appropriate before I ask these questions. Do you feel that I should ask these specific environmental engineering questions now or after the applicant?
Gary, do you have any preference?
Well, I thank you for asking that. I think we should wait to hear from Sean. sort of to give the broader outlines before we go deep into the details. That would be my suggestion.
All right. Do expect my hand up again later. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. All right, so Commissioner, any more questions for Monica at this time? We can always come back later. So, okay, so at this time, I would like to ask the applicant to present your case. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Farrelly, and I'm the redevelopment project manager for the city of Tigard. And I'm the city project manager on this very important project for downtown, Universal Plaza and Path. I have a really brief presentation. It's gonna kind of look at why we're doing this project and in this location. And for more specific environmental questions, we can direct those to Gary. Okay, so why we're doing this project? You know, there's been identified a need for a central gathering place for Tigard. That goes back to the City Center TIF district from 2006 and the Tigard Downtown Improvement Plan 2005. Looking for a place in downtown to kind of hold events like the farmers market, movies in the park, concerts, different festivals, fests. And this TIF agency owned property, which is formerly Ferguson Plumbing, you may remember that. You know, it's all concrete right now. We tore down the building. We chose this place because it was a very key location near but not right on Main Street, and then right next to Fano Creek and near the park and near the trail, which is very important in locating this plaza. You know, the goal is to attract new visitors, customers, residents, and investments to downtown. And, you know, we've been planning this since 2018. This project is, we spent a long time, you know, figuring out what we wanted the theme to be, what kind of amenities we wanted. Did a lot of public engagement and began design and engineering and some, we wanted to have a lot more activity on the kind of temporary plaza that's there now, as was mentioned. You know, we just, we have a few pieces of furniture out there and some art and some drawings on the concrete. Unfortunately, we had a kickoff for this project, I think, right as COVID hit. So we had to switch gears. We did have some public engagement and activation going on there, but not as much as we would hoped. But anyway, we did engage with the public through some design advisories and talking to our boards and committees. And we got to work with you know, a nationally known landscape architect group called Rios, do public spaces all over the country, and also working with a very well-known water feature designer called Fluidity, who works all over the country. So, you know, we're in 50% construction drawings right now, and we're planning to go to construction in April. So looking at what is actually going to be on the plaza, and this represents a slightly earlier rendition. There's a couple of things that have changed since then. But basically, the idea is that the front porch is kind of where these swings are, and they're not swings that'll go too high, but more for sitting and talking and having conversations with people, or people you know, or maybe people you don't. We have some green space, some lawn space for playing. We have a water feature that's going to be very cool. That'll be lit at night. The water will go in patterns. I think this is going to be a really big attractor for downtown, bringing a lot of parents and kids, and not just kids. When it's a hot day, I'm sure we'll find a lot of people in that water feature. So yeah, during the summer, this is going to be very popular, but we want it to be well used throughout the year. So that's why we are leaving enough space for events and other activities that can happen. So there'll be a restroom featured, lots of tables and seating. And there will also be a, not shown here, but a community table, kind of a larger table structure that could, where many people can eat at once. And there'll be lighting for safety. Very important that safety be addressed in this plan. Shows a little more of the details. There's going to be a lot of landscaping, a lot of plantings and native plantings, especially in the stormwater area that is shown in the area closest to Fano Creek Park. We're trying to do a lot, accomplish a lot on this property, so weren't really able to shrink it down. We did lose some because of the stormwater treatment, some active space because of stormwater treatment, but we think having a really good stormwater, well planted, with interpretive signage about how Fano Creek watershed works will be a good add to this project. So Monica showed this image before, but really important to connect to Fano Creek Trail. As was mentioned, if we did not build a connection, we think people would make the connection anyway. They're just gonna kind of walk through there and maybe not respect the natural area that is there. There is a section of it that is boardwalk, as was mentioned before, and with the ability to use these helical piers, it's going to be a much lower impact on the areas in question. And then we are looking in a few years to do a phase 2 of this project that would feature a shade structure and rain, keep the rain and sun off people, and a community room that would be a great asset to the residents of Tigard. So that is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions or direct you to someone who can answer the question if I don't know the answer.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Shirk, please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for the presentation. So I have a couple questions. 156 square feet of wetland will be impacted, and it's essentially just impacted by piers, right, that are sitting in the wetland.
Mm-hmm.
So we're voting tonight to recommend that this square footage be removed from the inventory. That's correct? Is that right? That we're voting to recommend that this amount of square footage would be removed from the inventory, the wetland inventory?
Correct. You are making a recommendation to the city council, and city council will hear this item as well as a public testimony on January 4th.
Okay. So what do you know what is the size of the current wetland inventory in the city of Tigard? Does anybody know what that is?
I don't know the actual acreage of the Tigard significant wetland. I know Tom Mcguire is on the call if he wants to speak generally to that, but in kind of the history of it, of the Tigard significant wetlands.
So, good evening. I didn't introduce myself before. I'm Tom Mcguire. I'm the Assistant Community Development Director. I don't know off the top of my head the total number of wetlands, significant wetlands we have. Part of that is they change a little, and the way our code works, we have, if someone's proposing to impact them, we have them hire someone to do a wetland delineation So we get the accurate locations of everything and the sizes on the property, but it's probably in the, I think easily over 100, maybe even over 200 acres, depending on what all your, if you're counting, you know, some pretty major wetlands and some city parks and so forth, it's probably over 200 acres at least, if not more.
So the crux of the argument really is a trade-off, right? That there's this public benefit by for enhancement of the trail to remove this amount from the wetland inventory, and so in exchange for removing this amount from the wetland inventory, there's a great perceived or it's being presented as a very good public benefit, and some other wetland somewhere else is being improved, right? At the bank. Is that the crux of the argument, kind of in a super simplified?
That's
And additional on-site will be, or along Fano Creek, in coordination with CWS, they are doing some restoration and improvement along the Fano Creek. So yes, there is a different mitigation aspects.
Right, so improvement of existing, and then improvement off-site, and then public benefit.
That's essentially correct. There's probably a couple details that are important that haven't been touched on yet. One of those is, you remember from the 217 highway widening, the Fano Creek Trail, we went through this Esee analysis in areas where we removed some significant wetland from the inventory. And you remember that our regulations, even if we count the wetland as delineated plus 50 feet for the buffer, even if in the buffer, even in that 50 feet, there's no wetland or no vegetation like was on the 217 highway. Similar situation here. There's a big chunk of paved surface left over from the business that used to be there that is inside that buffer. That's being torn out and restored to vegetated buffer, and water quality facility will be, a natural water quality facility will be placed in that area as well. So that's in addition to the actual wetland mitigation bank for the specific whatever 129 square feet. And then I would say, I just let the Planning Commission know, I was probably the most skeptical of this idea at the city from the start, and I really pushed the development team, which is the downtown redevelopment agency, and pushed them hard to justify this. And the key for me is this is going to be, as Sean described, it's going to be quite an attraction. It's going to be a major thing for downtown Tigard, and people are going to want to go there. And we have this really wonderful reconstruction of the Fano Creek Trail, you know, a few hundred yards to the west. And there's going to be a lot of people on that trail, and they're going to see stuff going on over there. And people are people. A good portion of them are going to go straight to that location. And they're going to go walk right through the buffer. They're going to walk right through the wetland. We see it all the time. We get these demand trails. This is very similar to the same argument we made in Dirksen Nature Park. I don't remember if any of the planning commissioners are on the commission now when we approved when the planning commission approved the improvements at Dirksen Nature Park. There's a very special wetland in Dirksen Nature Park, and we built a boardwalk and a viewing platform. Part of it goes into the wetland, but we did that specifically to allow people to get access to the resource, but control that access. So they're on the boardwalk, it's fenced. It keeps them where we want them instead of wandering all over through the resource. So that was the main argument that works in this location. And then at that point, we pushed the team to reduce the size, look at all the different ways to construct it to absolutely minimize impacts as much as possible. Now that's usually how environmental reviews go. That's how Clean Water Services looks at things. That's how Department of State Lands looks at things. That's how the Corps of Engineers looks at things. You know from past experience that our significant wetland regulations are basically, there doesn't give us even that leeway to kind of make those trade-offs. The only process we have to go into anything, any portion of our significant wetlands is this ESEE process. So, you know, I think they did a pretty good job, a really good job, I should say, of reducing the impact as much as possible. And I think if this trail is not here, it could very easily end up in a greater impact than, you know, what we're proposing. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dick?
Yes, I have a question about the original site. It was a Brownsfield, and the city received quite a lot of money to correct that area. How does this new path impact the cleanup of the Brownsfield area right there?
So I think you're thinking of another property that the agency owns, and that was on Main Street near Fano Creek.
You're right, probably
yeah.
was. So I have a secondary question. It said in the initial review that you were having an arborist look at everything, and if you could point me to where that report is, I would love it.
Yeah, we definitely did an arborist report. I can find out who it is. Gary, was not in the applicant materials.
Yes.
It is.
Which page was it on? I somehow missed that.
I think it was Tarragon, wasn't it? Wasn't it?
Tarragon.
Yeah.
It was
The
Todd
Tarragon.
Todd Prager at Tarragon. Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying when you're talking about putting in this path with the pillars that you think people would walk over it anyway, so to put a pathway in would actually be more beneficial for that wetlands area than to let people make their own goat trail through there?
I think so, yeah. That's the main reason we're doing it. Just think there's going to be a lot of people, as Tom said, we're going to be on Fano Creek, see activities going on there, and they're going to want to be there, and they're going to take the shortest route.
That's true. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Miranda?
Thank you. I too was very skeptical of the plan when it came about a few years ago and voiced some concerns at council. And one of those concerns had to do with parking. And I see in the plan that there is no on-site parking designated in the park, and wondered if their
town parking strategy that is going to, number one, adjust some of the parking regulations on Burnham. Right now, a lot of Burnham Street has no parking limit on it. And so we actually did a parking study that found that some people are parking there all day. So we don't like that. We want that parking to be for customers and visitors to the downtown. If you're going to park all day, you should park on a parking lot. So we're going to adjust those parking regulations, and then along with that, when we had the big usage of this plaza is going to be evenings and weekends. And so we're going to have signage that's going to direct people to park in the city parking lots that are not too far away, City Hall and the Public Works Building, which are pretty empty at night and weekends. So we will be directing people to park there, especially for events. We'll have signage up that'll say, Universal Plaza parking this way.
And so there may or may not be like handicapped accessible reparking kind of situation in that area.
I mean, we'll take a look at some on-street spaces like that. Those are harder to do sometimes, but we can take a look at that. You know, longer term, we want to build a parking structure that would go along with a proposed new city hall. We're not completely sure if that's going to happen, but if it does, that will definitely include spaces for disabled.
Awesome. On the proposed path to connect to Fano Creek, would there be nighttime lighting?
So on the path, I don't believe so. In the plaza, yes, there is going to be lighting. We heard from people during the planning and design of this from the public that they want to feel safe in there. So they'll definitely be lit at night. I don't know that we have plans for lighting on the trail. Do you happen to know that, Gary? No, I don't think we do. We would like to get lighting on the Fano Creek Trail, you know, pedestrian level lighting sometime in the future.
The reason I ask is that as a wetland, obviously light affects birds and bird migration and animals. And so that is a key concern, I know, for quite a bit of people, but also from a safety perspective. I know the other side of the coin is quite a few people are concerned about safety. When you showed us one of your maps and spoke about the stormwater area, I didn't quite understand what area that was on your particular map. In our documents, we had several different options, and I wasn't clear on which storm water choice was made.
Yeah, let me bring that up. I don't know if you can see my pointer, can you?
Is it the lighter area in the top left to me corner?
Yeah, it's the top left. Yeah.
So that's kind of the grading. It's that one. Okay. Right. Then I believe my last couple questions are for Gary, and that was in that, does a boardwalk, the shading underneath, cause more habitat options or less habitat options for the types of critters that want to live near Fano Creek?
I don't think the natural resource assessment went into that level of detail about habitat to answer that specifically. I think the conclusion was that this is relatively minor. There's no barrier. Critters can go under the boardwalk or across the trail, so it doesn't inhibit their movement in their current habitat. I imagine, though, there might be an ecosystem that grows up under the shade of that boardwalk, but which critters would use it, I don't know.
Okay. And then I believe my last question has to do with previous remediation. And so as I look at our maps and the wetland that we're specifically speaking about removing, looks like a mitten. And it also looks man-made. And so my assumption is that this particular remediation was created. Is that correct? And in what value was that particular shape? And is removing it remove the value of why that was created to look like that?
So what image are you referring to?
In all of our maps, the wetland looks like, it goes as like a little thumb, and then it has like a little mitten on the side of the creek.
Ah, okay, I see what you're saying. All right, now what was the question again about that?
It looks man-made. Yes, it looks man-made. And so my assumption is that it was remediation or recreation realignment, and that it was it was created in such a way for a reason. And what was that reason? And in removing that, does that negate the reason it was made?
So a couple things. One is that the remeander did change the wetland in this area. And in one of the exhibits, I think it's the it's figure 3 in the service provider letter, shows that the area that is the thumb, I think, in the mitten you're talking about, that goes as furthest east, is new wetland that was delineated this last summer after the effects of the remeander of Fano Creek took effect. So there was no, my understanding is that there may have been some grading associated with the remeander, but I don't think any substantive grading in this area. I don't think there was any attempt to create wetlands where, but I think that there was a natural, and Tom Mcguire, who knows wetlands probably better than I do, could speak for how they can spontaneously change when the water table has been affected. Did that answer your question? And was there a second part to it?
Nope, that was it. And I thank you so much for answering all my questions. Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson, please go ahead.
Going back to the topic of controlled access and paving the cow path, I guess is the expression. Is there any concern if this proposed trail alignment were built, is there any concern that people might cut, so at the south end of Ash, where it goes from being a street to a trail, the people would cut through just directly west to hit that first big bend of the proposed asphalt path? Or is that stand of trees going to be enough to discourage that, do we think?
I'm happy to answer that. And Tom as well. I think it's a good question. The trees are along Ash, the trail in the Ash right of way are fairly thick there and are tended to remain. Also, this area, the green corner that's represented in the service provider letter image, is a mitigation area that's all been planted already by Clean Water with the remeander. And so even though it's hard to see a couple of years later, that should thicken up pretty well in the next couple of years. So I think there will be enough vegetation there to discourage that kind of early departure from the trail. That'd be my opinion anyway.
The other thing is there's quite a grade drop off from the trail in Ash Creek that drops off about 3 or 4 feet down before you get to those trees. So, and it's also floodplain down there. I don't know how wet it got in the wintertime. It would be probably some standing water from time to time. So it's not the most pleasant, even though on a map it looks like an easy cut through. On the ground, it would not be that easy of a cut through.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you bring up the map of the area so we know what you are talking about? Sean, can you bring back up the trail map? Yeah, that one. So can somebody repeat which section was Commissioner Jackson was talking about?
Can you just use your pointer, Gary, or whoever is sharing, and just show that? Yeah, right there. So this would be from in front of the Atwater, basically, that corner. That's a fairly low demand number too, I would think, but it's still an issue, it's still a valid concern. So if you're coming down Ash Avenue from the dog park, maybe if you went that way, is there a tendency to cut? You can kind of see, even in this image, you can see the topo lines right there where that bank is, right at the point of his cursor right now.
Yes, I lost the train of thought. Somebody else was sharing this image, so I didn't have the cursor that worked on it, I didn't think. Was there a further question with Tom's explanation?
Since you have this map up, so I just want to clarify, I guess following up on Commissioner Brooks' question. So all of the trail, every section of the trail is on a platform, is that correct? Or is it only part of it is on a platform?
Yeah, just the part where the cursor is in purple.
The pink part.
Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
it goes further than that. I'm sorry, it goes, yeah, there goes to that point there, yeah.
So just the purple part is elevated, the rest are flat.
Agreed.
Okay. All
And
right,
again, because it's in the floodplain, it stays, it's flat to the ground, so it's not going to be elevated or anything like that, because we can't add, to put it, quote the regulations, it has to be no rise. So there's no building up the ground level through there.
So I'm confused. So this is not, I wish there was a 3D picture of what the path would look like.
So I might be able to help describe it. I guess it's not, purple is just a portion of what I was referring to. It's orange maybe, which is the boardwalk color. And it leads, the part on grade leading from Fano Creek is yellow in the image and does a reverse serpentine. And then it comes to a break right there where it takes off. Essentially from that point to the plaza is almost flat, but the ground falls away and then comes back up. So it's only a couple feet at most above grade and tapers to 0 at both ends. And that the part right there where the cursor was, where it goes over the wetland, is the lowest point of the land that's related to a drainage along the property line between the plaza and the B&B printing.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Watson, please go ahead with your question.
It's almost more of a comment than a question, but this, in my mind, reminds me very much of a park in Lake Oswego, Azalea Field at Lusher Farm. There's a popular walking trail there that switches back and forth between asphalt on grade to a boardwalk going over the wetlands. It seems like a pretty successful example to me. Is that an accurate comparison to what is in the mind of the designers?
I'm familiar with Lusher Farms, but not the sidewalk there, not the boardwalk.
Yeah, if you and I apologize, I can't remember which direction it's in, but there's the two dog parks, and there's a trail that it's like a half-hour walk that it extends off, and it crosses wetlands with using boardwalks. Really, a couple times, I believe. So they're very successful in terms of keeping the dogs out of the wetlands, and of course people as well. And then there's just grassy areas where the asphalt is.
And Tigard has some boardwalks in its system too, in Fano Creek system, some of which are planned in the new, which you probably heard about recently in the new Fano Creek Trail improvements. But there are existing ones also around that will sort of approximate this, I think.
Okay. So has Tigard found those? Obviously they do. They find those areas as successful. The boardwalks are successful in containing the pedestrian or directing the pedestrian traffic and while protecting the wetlands to a certain degree.
Yes, and I guess I would dwell on a point you made. This boardwalk will be, because it's not very high, it's not required to have a railing. And so a railing is not proposed here. Instead, just a 4-inch or 6-inch curb along each side of it to create sort of the maximum openness. And so that may be different in what your comparisons offer also.
Well, Azalea doesn't have guardrails on their boardwalks either. So I don't know if the commissioners would like to visit examples of wetlands with a similar scheme. That's one place they could go.
I think Dirksen has also been very successful. I know visiting there several times and really highlighting the wonderful resource we have, but directing people on the path, on the boardwalk, seems to be very successful there. And we've approved a similar comprehensive plan amendment for that specific case as well.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any more questions at this point? All right, so we'll have another chance for a question. Commissioner K7, please go ahead.
Hi, hey, thanks for the presentation. The question I had was, now that we have some of these existing examples of where we have installed these raised walkways, etc., do we have any measure of how successful we were in preserving habitat or anything like that, based on the historical, where we have kind of encroached some of the wetlands and stuff? Do we have any measure of when the other comment, when Commissioner Watson was making a comment of successful, that triggered the thought, is success really mean we have been able to preserve or grow the habitat, or what exactly does that really mean?
We probably don't have the right staff here to answer that. I know Carla in our engineering, I know there's several boardwalks near Walnut. I know there's several restoration areas that have been done in Tigard. And then I specifically brought up Dirksen and the Camas fields and all the restoration that has gone on. But I'm not sure if any of us can talk about statistics on how successful those have been, but they appear to contain the public, but also allow for the public to enjoy these resources that we have in an interactive way to learn what resources we do have. If anyone else wants to add to that, it's just a...
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dick.
Thank you. Monica, I just wanted to add to your little piece about Dirksen Park. I use that park all the time, and It is not a large area, but it does have railings on it, and the pilings are over the wetlands, so that when it rains, you could actually walk out there and look for wildlife, and it's a really nice asset there. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, if there are no more questions this time, I'm going to move on to public testimony. Okay, it's time for public testimony. Again, the calling number for public testimony is 503-966-4101. So speakers will be time limited to 3 minutes. Your time will begin after you clearly state your name and address. Please also spell your last name. And please also state whether you are in favor, against, or neutral with the application. All right, Keelan, do we have any callers?
There are no callers at this time.
I thought there would be. Commissioners, do you have any more questions for the staff? Commissioner K7 and Dick's hands are still up, but I suspect it was from before.
Oops, sorry. It was.
No problem. Okay. Commissioners, do you have any more questions for the staff?
Excuse me, President Hu.
Go ahead, Tom.
Since we're at staff question point, I have a question for you actually specifically. You had mentioned that you felt that Esee analysis was lacking in a lot of places, and I was wondering if you could give us any more specifics. So I understand the one that you pointed out, and yeah, I think it's probably, I think Gary had a good evaluation of where that probably came from. It's probably not the strongest argument. You know, I think it's a factor. It's not the major factor. But so I was wondering what, because your statement was pretty strong, and the Esee analysis is pretty key to this whole thing. So I was wondering if you have specific things. Is that something you want to cover, or that you want answers to? Is there something I can help?
I think, yeah, I think several commissioners brought up questions, like Commissioner Jackson brought up the point of that, would the proposed pathway really prevent rogue or demand trails? And to be honest, the answer I got was kind of disappointing too. It's a lot of speculation, like, yeah, there are trees there, so people probably will not make rogue trails. Like, okay. So, and social consequences, like, you know, it would drive up business, and business like it, but the printing shop next door flatly said no to trails, so they're obviously not keen on having more trails, at least on their property, I guess. So I just feel like there are a lot of things that are just scratching the surface and just not dive deep enough for me. So that's just me, my personal feeling, and the fact that I don't know, are there any plans to expand Universal Plaza if neighboring lots becoming available? You know, if they are, if the city would love to take over the the printing shop one point to make a part of it, I mean, why can't we just wait and have the trail there? Or can we just wait to build a trail later when there's a demonstration that there's actually rogue trail? I just have lots of, I know the impact, the section is kind of small, but still, since the Esee analysis is the foundation of this, taking away the protected status, I just you know, that's just something not sitting right with me. So I just wish they would give me more concrete evidence to support. It just sounds to me like they already reached a conclusion and they're just putting things in there to justify their conclusion. So
Yeah.
so that's my concern. So I'm not saying it's poorly done. I'm just saying this is something
Okay.
that's missing.
So, well, my couple responses to that, if you're open to that.
Sure.
As far as future plans, so I think I don't know that there are any future plans to expand Universal Plaza. If there are, it would likely go the other direction, I would think. But the printing, yeah, so when the printing property if it redevelops, when it redevelops someday, the downtown plan has a requirement for basically an alley along the back side of that property line. And so given that, that's why we tried extremely hard to get them to agree to an easement, because we could have basically put the trail right through the location of where we want the future alley to go. But they were absolutely not interested in that at this time. They did not want to, you know, have that issue. They didn't want to disturb their parking lot. I don't know what future plans they have. They could redevelop in 5 years. It could be 20 years. We don't really know, and we have no control over that. So this was our only other option.
Okay. Well, there's an eminent domain, but I know the city doesn't like to do that. So
that would be an even.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
And you know, what the thing about trails is, you can't put a trail. You were saying, well, are people going to make that other cut? Well, you try to get the trail in the place that's going to be most attractive to the most people. So yes, there's that reverse S curve there. It's a bit of an out of direction to go from that T intersection at Ash in front of the new apartments there. So I can't say that there aren't some people that are going to go crashing down through there and cut across. There might be, but it's not going to be the numbers probably that's going to be a number of people often enough to wear a trail in through there, you know, a demand trail through there. Most of the people going to the plaza are going to be coming from the existing Fano Creek Trail direction. And the other thing is, no, we haven't been, to my knowledge, and I don't know what Parks is doing, we haven't been monitoring those other areas where we've done this before, but Parks, you know, continues to want to do this, I think, because anecdotally, they're not seeing problems with it. They're not seeing situations where we're getting demand trails along with a trail. You know, it seems to be working for them, but we don't have a specific study that I can point to for you.
Yeah, another thing is, I just learned that the trail, the platform will not have railing, so that's actually not preventing people from stepping onto the wetland from the trail. So that might actually be negative. So that's another thing I'm thinking now. So because today I was actually looking from where the proposed trail will be to Universal Plaza, and I look at it, I was like, wow, that's pretty far. I'm not going to make a rogue trail, but if you actually have a platform there, make them easy to step on it. It will make me easier to step off the platform too, and actually ruin the wetland even more. So, you know, that's another unseen that I just don't know which direction I'm comfortable with. So, so in summary, there are a lot of unanswered questions in my mind. So I'm skeptical, but I know there are uncertainties. So, but I see Commissioner Watson also have questions or comments.
So the photograph, architect behavior on my part. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I put a picture of one of the boardwalks in the at Lusher Farm in the chat. So basically, there's a boardwalk that doesn't have railings on it at whenever there's crossing the wetlands, and then whenever it becomes asphalt on grade, there's a short wooden fence, and I've walked that trail, I don't know, like at least 15 times over the years. I've never seen anybody go off-roading and jumping into a wetland or anyway, so one possible idea, or that might make the planning commission feel more comfortable, is the idea of maybe a low fence that basically, if somebody's gonna want to jump in the creek, they're gonna jump in the creek. I mean, you're not gonna stop them, but like a simple low fence would be an inexpensive way to kind of discourage people from cutting trails through the woodlands. And it's just an example of a similar pathway that seems successful and has been around for many years.
Okay. Keelan, do you have a comment?
We got a last minute caller if you're still entertaining phone and testimony.
Yeah, sure. Gary, do you have anything to add at this point, Gary?
Yes, I just wanted to reply to Commissioner Watson that thank you for that example. That image helps everyone understand what the boardwalk would look like. Actually, it's a good representation of it. And the discussion about managing coming off the boardwalk has in part been answered by how the landscaping adjacent to it would be managed, so that you wouldn't. I don't think it's unlike this grassy area. I think the landscaping, Clean Water Services landscaping, is a mix of brush or bushes and grasses and such. So there is some thought in the landscape plan to planting adjacent to the boardwalk to address that issue. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Keelan, please patch through our caller, please.
All right, they are now in the room.
Welcome, caller.
Hi there.
Go ahead, please state your name and address and spell your last name. And after you're done now, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Steve D'Angelo, DEANGELO, property owner at 9037 Southwest Burnham Street, basically a lot and a half across the street from the Universal Plaza, and I'm presently the past president of the Tigard Downtown Alliance. And I have some just general questions and comments. I'll try to keep it short. I'm wondering if any of the staff, elected officials, or commissioners visited during the recent high water event. And you need not answer that question now, but I'm asking that I did go to the high water event and see the wetlands impacted by the, I guess it's called atmospheric river, and it was interesting. So I do recommend and suggest pathway lighting due to the recent activity, I'll call it, some of which has been negative on the Fano Creek Trail in the recent weeks and months with deaths and just vandalism and so forth. So I'd ask that the commission ask about pathway lighting. I'm interested in the educational piece and discussing the flora and the fauna of the area. Not only is the wetlands important, but what grows and lives in there, I think, is an educational component that should be considered. And how does the raised boardwalk maintain over years? Are those footings, I suggest, are probably made of concrete? That boardwalk eventually is going to be absorbed with water. Is that pressure treated wood? Is that wood that's pressure treated easing into the ecosystem? That would be a concern of mine. Parking is a continual issue on Burnham Street. And I think you asked if I'm a proponent or opposed to the Plaza. I'm neutral at this point. I do believe the Plaza will be an enhancement for our downtown area. And I think these considerations are of utmost importance. Burnham is an extension of the downtown area and will continue to expand the Downtown Alliance's footprint. So and the at-grade maintenance, whether those pathways become absorbed with water, are they a permeable material such as the trail along the rail bed? Those are my comments, questions. Thank you for your time. The presentation was very enlightening tonight, and I appreciate everyone's inputs.
Thank you. Before you go, Commissioner, do you have any questions for the caller? Commissioner Jackson, please go ahead.
Hello, yes, I apologize if I just missed it, but were you, overall, are you for, against, or neutral toward the proposed trail?
I love the idea of the trail and the accessibility. I certainly want to make sure that we don't impact our wetlands to the point where we would trade off any benefit. So at this point, I would say I'm neutral to positive, if that's a place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any more questions for the caller? No. Thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate you. Commissioner Miranda, you have a question. Go ahead.
I just had a quick question. In observing the atmospheric river event, could you describe what kind of impact you saw? Interesting, leads me to all kinds of ideas.
Well, I have some pictures, and I'm happy to share them with the group via email if you put that in the chat, or if you can have Sean Fairley knows how to get a hold of me. But, you know, the B&B corner that is adjacent to the wetlands was underwater. And what I normally observe when I visit the Plaza is not underwater. And that water was certainly encroaching that that corner where the pathway is proposed. So just wanting assurance that those specific conditions, I've been in downtown Tigard and a resident of Tigard since 1989. So I know the area floods. I've seen the water over Burnham in the old days, and not ever encroaching upon my properties, but when the water comes up and nowhere for the water, issue. So how are those considered through this plan?
Thank you so much, sir.
Any more questions, Commissioner? I see none. Okay, again, thank you so much for calling. We really appreciate your participation.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners, do you have any more questions for the staff before we go into deliberation? I see none, so I'm going to close the public hearing. All right, Commissioner, it's time for deliberation. No further testimony or questions from the audience are allowed. So, just what are your thoughts on this? What are you concerned? What you like about it? What? Go ahead, Commissioner Dick.
Thank you, President Hu. My comment would be, I think Universal Plaza is well needed downtown. My concern is the wetlands area and the pilings, and without a rail on that portion, people will step off. They do all the time on the Fano Creek Trail. I'm on that daily. I am concerned about the wildlife in the area. It's going to be a little noisier with the plaza, but it's something that will help bring people downtown. And the whole aspect to bring them downtown is for walking and biking. And so I know that's why there's not a lot of parking, because they're encouraging a more healthy way to get there instead of driving. But I just think we should protect the wetlands area. Even with railings. The one in Dirksen Park has railings to keep you from stepping off into it. So I think that that's a better direction than just having a platform or a wood or bridge or whatever it's going to be there with pilings with without having railings. I just think they need them.
All right, thank you. Before I ask more questions, I want to open up the public hearing section just a little bit because I forgot to ask the staff to respond to the caller. I think the caller have a question about the type of footing that will be used for the platform. Can Monica or Gary answer that question?
I might be able to help
Go
answer
ahead.
that.
Go ahead, Gary.
The decision for which type of substructure hasn't been decided yet. But there are generally three types. There's the helix pier, which is a metal, the thing that touches the ground is I think a metal footing in the helix pier, or what's called the star pier, I think is an alternative, or concrete, which is what's shown in the SPL. And then on top of that would be either pressure treated wood, or could be plastic lumber, or it could be steel, and weathered steel or galvanized steel. And I think Steve D'Angelo brings up a good point about maintenance, which was, and longevity of what the substructure would be made from, and that you know, maintenance and building it for the long term rather than replacement was the direction that the committee was headed. So I think at this point, committee is favoring the helix pier with a metal substructure that would support the decking.
Thank you. And I think you also asked about parking and lighting, but I think they were addressed before, so.
So I'm back again. Since you kindly opened the hearing up for staff response again, I would like to comment a little bit about the discussion of the railings. I'm a little concerned from two aspects. One, depending on the style and the type of railing and how, you know, on both sides, how big they are, what elevations they're at, there could be some floodplain impacts because, as Mr. D'Angelo described, I didn't go out to look in the after the most recent heavy rains, but I would imagine there was probably a lot of water out there because it's all in the floodplain. So, you know, and that is designed that way. It's designed to have periodic inundation of the trail. That's why it's a wetland. That's partly why it's a wetland. It's partly how that's all supposed to work. That happens sometimes now on the existing Fano Creek Trail and some other trails that we have. So there's not a concern necessarily about that, because that would be, if there's a concern, it's the maintenance. It causes more maintenance for our park staff, and they have to factor that into their schedules. So then the other thing is, if we're putting railings into that area, we would have to do it in a way where we don't cause a rise, and it's a zero rise, so it's basically no rise, so we can't raise the floodplain elevation at all by putting things in the floodplain. So, you know, and that's either through, if we do the rails, we would have to look for, and if it does cause a rise, we'd have to look for some sort of excavation or something somewhere else. So now you're adding a lot of cost. And then my other comment about that is the entire Fano Creek Trail, all the way through Fano Creek Park from from 99 down to Hall, there are no rails in there. And you look at that section of it just across the creek, or just at where the Ash Creek Trail section connects. It's all very open, and you get a very open, almost plains, or almost a prairie-like look to it all, at least right now. So I'd be concerned about everything else being open and then this small section of trail having fences or rails along it. Especially when it's wet, I don't think people are going to be jumping off the boardwalk into the wetland. And my experience is most people stick to the trail, but that's personal opinion right there. But so anyway, I just wanted to respond to some of those comments.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioner, any question for staff before I close the public hearing again? Go ahead, Commissioner Dick.
I just had one more comment. So the Dirksen Park, probably the boardwalk area in there and the Vantage Lookout is above grade. And so that's probably the difference of why that's heavily railed. But it's also very movable. When you walk on it, it kind of rolls, and that's for the high water to roll through it. So how is that different than what you're just having just the deck to walk on, whereas without rails? Why is that area so needed when it floods the same way there, and it has rails and the whole unit can move with the ebb and flow of the water?
Well, I'm not familiar enough with the design of the decking and the platform at Dirksen to comment on the movement. The rails, I remember the discussion about the rails, and that was because it is the destination. It's a viewing platform. It's the end of basically the end of the trail, basically. So rather than passing through, it's the place to go and observe that wetland. And so it was just felt at that time that they needed, for control, to keep people out of that wetland. And it's a pretty special wetland. It's unique in Tigard and parts of the metro area. So they were kind of going above and beyond in an effort to keep people on the viewing platform.
Thank you. Commissioner Miranda, you have a question for Tom?
Yes, I do. In any of the preparation for the plaza and this presentation, was the problem of lighting considered? Obviously, trying to put lights along the trail brings a huge cost. Electrifying wetlands doesn't sound fun, safe, or cheap. But the safety issue is of great concern. I mean, I'm glad that Mr. D'Angelo brought it up, because it's an increasing concern, and he's right. There are increasing events happening, and it seems short-sighted to not tackle that, and also tackle that with our environmental kind of agenda of saving energy, keeping the birds safe. It's a lot of different priorities. And so was this topic brought up and budgeted for?
So lighting along the Fano Creek Trail, at least in the downtown part, is a future project. And we'll be looking at lighting that's possibly even solar lighting, because that has come a long way, and lighting that would be the least intrusive into wildlife needs. But that's a separate question from this project. The only place lighting is being proposed here is in the plaza itself. So the lighting on Fano Creek in the downtown section, we're going to be taking a look at that probably the following fiscal year after this project separately.
So it's definitely a different pot of money than the development of Universal Plaza period with this part. So it could come later in a more global response to lighting on Fano Creek. Okay, thank you so much.
That's right.
Thank you. If there's no more question, I'm going to close the public hearing again. Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, so I have not heard from Commissioner Roberts. Commissioner Roberts, what do you think? This is deliberation.
Yes, I've been quiet. I'm generally in favor of it, to put it simply, and was just letting the various comments wash over my brain here to make sure I've got it all. I get the safety issues, railing. I was glad to see in the picture that was shared of the other boardwalk that there are little, I don't know if you call them railings, but along the edges at the very low, so that you don't, if you're in a wheelchair, you don't roll over. Basically, is what I was thinking. Something that might stop you, even though it isn't at a high level of railing. So I'm thinking as long as we have something like that, we should be okay. And I get the whole back and forth regarding, are we removing wetlands? Is it really making a big impact? It's in the middle of the city, so I don't know what really is living there and how many and what kinds of animals. But overall, I'm in favor.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm going to call Commissioner Brooke or Commissioner Watson. Go ahead. Oh, Commissioner Brooke, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll be fast. I think, I mean, as always, I really appreciate the thoroughness that the staff has put into their analysis of the situation. Are we allowed to say that we want railings? I know, or dictate certain. I feel like those things should be up to designers and staff, and not us. But I do. I feel kind of conflicted over the lighting situation, because if I were walking, especially during the winter when it gets dark so early, you want it to be light, but then that does affect the creatures that are living there. I'm overall very excited to have the Fano Creek Trail continued. I used to live right next to the trail and I loved walking on it, so having it extended is really exciting to me. So I feel like I'm in the same place where the caller was. You said I'm neutral, but neutral positive.
That's a good way to put it. Thank you. Commissioner Watson, what do you think?
I am moderately positive, generally speaking. And yeah, I mean, this is a planning commission review, so there's always more design that's going to occur after we have our opinions about it. And one of those opinions that I wanted to put out there is that in terms of safety and long-term maintenance, I've been really impressed with the boardwalks at Lusher Farm. They're plastic lumber. I'm not sure of the type, but they have worn incredibly well. There's almost no, with pressure treated wood, things get a little warpy, and there's knot holes and stuff. It kind of dissolves over time, and I just and you can there are there's plastic lumber out there that is made with recycled plastics, and so there's a lot of benefits to it, and I just wanted to plug for something more durable and consistent in quality than pressure treated wood.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson.
So continuing with the trend, I would rate myself as also moderately positive overall. For me, I think the main argument that sold it for me was the whole controlled access concept and reducing those demand paths. I will say that I think I kind of understand what you were saying, President Hu, about the ESCE report, that at times it came off more rhetorical than analytical. So I understand maybe where your frustration there is coming from, but even so, I did tend to buy the argument they were making, and especially again because of the controlled access idea.
Thank you. Commissioner K7.
Getting there. So I am also reasonably positive about the whole thing, especially the Universal Plaza. I'm completely positive. I think that's a beautiful thing. It'll be wonderful addition to our downtown area. Definitely all for it. This is the trail one is the one that's I'm kind of on the fence about it. I think it would have been nice to see some data on, where we have actually claimed some of the wetland area. What kind of changes have we seen over a period of time? That data would have really helped us, right? Because I'm pretty sure the reason we're doing it this way, there is enough confidence that we are not going to affect the habitat. We are not going to do any harm to the existing wetland is the theory, right? But given that we have a history of wetlands all over the place in the metro area, we having that data would have really helped us to make a very strong decision on that. And I'll also share some of the concerns about maintenance, et cetera, given it's in the floodplain. But otherwise, yeah, I'm reasonably positive.
Yeah, thank you. We are both science people, so we want to see data.
In me.
Yeah,
the geek in me. Sorry.
Yeah. Commissioner Shook, Commissioner Watson, I'll go back to you. Commissioner Shook.
I'm actually positive, not moderately positive. We all probably have our little boardwalk stories, and some of them have come out today. I was recently down at Rockaway Beach, and they have a 1.2-mile boardwalk trail out to a big tree, and it goes over a wetland and a bog. And it's like you're in a wonderland. And the more you're in that type of environment, and the cool thing about that one is it's a short one, so you don't have to be a guy who's going to go get on a hike and go do 10 miles to enjoy a boardwalk, somewhere out in the woods. But this is in the city, right next to a beautiful creek, and it's a perfect place for people to fall in love with their environment. And this is an invitation for them to do that. And that boardwalk trail out in Rockaway Beach, I mean, you hear the water running underneath it. It's truly like you're in a wonderland. And to think that you get to go out and be a part of that environment and see this huge tree, because the jurisdiction down there had the foresight to say, we need to let people see this stuff and enjoy it. And I agree with your concerns about the data, and but I don't like the rails. I think animals cross over the rails and things, and I don't think people step off. I mean, if we go hiking, usually I stay on the trail, most of the time. But I think it's a fabulous idea to get people to fall in love with it. It's one of those cool things that cities have. If you have a river running through your city or a little lake or something, and to know that our staff and are so cognizant of the trees and the canopy, and they're protecting our environment, and at the same time want us to enjoy it. And I don't know how you do that without a little bit of sacrifice. So I'm a solid positive, and I'd love to walk on the boardwalk down at Fennel Creek. So thanks.
Thank you. And I will go to Commissioner Miranda and then Commissioner Watson. Commissioner Miranda, your last word.
Oh, thank you for suffering all of my many questions.
No problem.
I too am a positive. I really am excited about the interpretive opportunities for education. I feel that I dove a little hardcore into the planting plan, and as much as I'm not a super fan of locusts, I totally understand why we're choosing those, and I appreciate the screen wall. Again, Jensen, I believe. I'd love to see more camas roots in the plan because that's such a wonderful native plant. And I think that kids are going to get excited and families are going to get excited. And the opportunity to engage with the river like that is going to make people interested in the neighbors of the park. And I think that everybody's behavior will improve. And that's something I'm really looking forward to. I also feel like this trail gives the opportunity to make a loop back on Ash, back to your car if you parked over there, or to the dog park. You don't have to go on the whole Fano Creek Trail, but you can if you want to. I think it's just, I'm really excited about it. And yeah, I had a wonderful time there today with my daughter. Yeah, positive.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Watson.
So in terms of, I just wanted to make a comment about, you know, the issue of data in regards to, you know, how a boardwalk like this with piles could potentially affect, you know, a wetlands and, you know, and also behave in the floodplain. And so I guess I would just suggest, you know, the city, perhaps the city or the applicant, perhaps look at precedents. So, you know, so the planning commission isn't having to sort of imagine what, you know, what this is like, but just sort of, you know, if dig into your portfolios and find, you know, positive examples where you've done essentially the same thing, and you know, show how it's used, and you know, whether it's successful or not, and you know, and is the ecosystem generally healthy around the intervention that we're doing. So photographic precedents would help people a lot in terms of understanding, you know, the design intent and how it is going to impact the environment.
Thank you. And for me, I'm positive for the Universal Plaza, but I have serious reservation about the ESEE consequences analysis, and because that's the foundation for the trail, for the trail part, I'm leaning toward neutral, negative. But since we have enough commissioners here supporting it, so anybody want to make a motion? We are making a recommendation to the city council.
I'd be happy to give it a try.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Roberts.
Okay, so I move that the Planning Commission move forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the application's Comprehensive Plan Amendment, CPA 2021-00004, and Sensitive Land Review, SLR 2021-00010, adoption of the findings and conditions of approval contained in the staff report, and based on the testimony received.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts.
My
So,
pleasure.
Commissioners, Commissioner Robert has forward motion to forward a recommendation approval to City Council of application CPA 2021-4 and SLR 2021-10, and adoption of the findings and conditions of approval contained in the staff report, and based on the testimony received. Before I ask for a second, do we have any more questions or discussion? All right, I see none. So anybody want to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Watson seconded. So please take some time to locate the hand button, and I'll give you a few seconds to click on it. So those in favor of the motion, please please click on the hand and leave it on until I say otherwise. Jose, so keep it on, please. Those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, please keep it on. So I'm going to read out those in favor: Commissioner Watson, Commissioner Roberts, Commissioner Shook, Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Brook, Commissioner K7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 6 commissioners voting yes. All right, so please lower your hand, please. Commissioner Brook, please lower your hand. Thank you. Those opposed, please raise your hand. I see none. Those abstain from the voting, please raise your hand. Okay, Commissioner Hu abstained from the vote. Okay, so the final vote is 6 to 0 to 1. The motion passes. So as Monica indicated, the City Council is planning to take on the hearing on January 4th, 2022. Thank you very much. So we're moving on to other business. So Monica, can I ask where you are moving to? Which agency is lucky enough to have you next?
Yeah, I'll be going to the city of McMinnville.
Oh, McMinnville! Wow.
Yeah, so a little further out, but I'm out towards that way, so it works out and going a little opposite of traffic. But I will definitely miss my time at Tigard and miss living in Tigard.
Yeah, we'll miss you too. Yeah. Well, good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great working with everybody, and yeah, it's been fun working so closely with the Planning Commission.
Yeah. Tom, do you have a party for Monica, or it's not allowed by COVID?
Yeah, those things are kind of dampened by COVID, but there's probably something in the works.
Oh.
She's not going far, so we'll be able to.
Do we have anything we need to discuss before
She'll be
next?
in the midst of all the wineries too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Monica. Yeah, I do have some other business tonight that I want to talk with the commission about. So, a couple things are going on. If you're watching the national, international news, you know that it's getting a lot more questions now about where the pandemic is going, and the leadership team for the city is going to be discussing that tomorrow, kind of looking along the lines of, do we want to stick with our thoughts of opening up city offices on January 4th? And along with that, you got the email from me and from the city manager about volunteer commissions and boards meeting in person again. I believe the city council is scheduled to move forward, but in digging through it deeper, it's going to be up to each commission or board to make that decision. So I wanted to talk to you about that tonight. My feeling, and I'll just tell you my personal feeling, is that the most difficult way to do one of these meetings is to do it hybrid, mixed with the combination of social distancing and masks. For one thing, we're a pretty big commission. We have we can have, or have had in the past, pretty big attendance by the public, by consultant teams, by city staff. You know, we've had a room full of people multiple times, and many of you have been there when that's happened. To do that, when we might have limitations on the numbers of people in the room, we can't have all of you up on the dais and have you all mic'd and have you social distanced. So commissioners are going to be spread out around the front of the room. Then you've got staff. Sometimes it's just me and one planner. Sometimes it's me and a planner, an engineer, several other city staff. They have consultant teams. So I have a lot of concerns about being able to pull off a hybrid meeting when we're still under mask and social distancing requirements. So I would probably advocate to the commission that we continue on with these virtual meetings as a commission, and kind of see where things go on into the spring with the health situation. And I'd like to have you kind of discuss that, but if there's a downside to these virtual meetings, I think it's the interaction with the public is tough because of the phone call. They're not, and I think President Hu, you've been handling that really well by allowing people to stay on the line and allow all the commissioners to question them. So, and we don't usually, even when we were live, we didn't usually, once the public testimony was over, we didn't usually allow people to come back up for a second time, very rare cases. So it's not that much different than when we were live in a meeting, but I think the perception from what I'm hearing of people on the phone is there's some frustration over the phone link. So anyway, I wanted to open it up to the commission and get some of your thoughts on how you feel about coming back to start meetings in the new year, hybrid, either some folks showing up in the room together, others online. Anyway, I'll stop talking.
Well, for me personally, I have no problem with meeting in person with fellow commissioners because we are required to be vaccinated. But I asked you before, and you say you don't have the question. The answer is whether the public who come in have to be vaccinated, and that's the part I don't feel comfortable with. And as long as everybody's vaccinated, or I even got my booster shot, so I'm comfortable in a room with them with or without masks, to be honest. But it's the unknown vaccination status of public that concerns me. So.
I'm totally comfortable with doing this remotely, and I echo that concern about what's the public going to be like. I feel personally safe, vaccinated and all, but if I were to vote, I would vote to keep them virtual. I always just assumed we'd be having to do this for another year potentially. It never dawned on me what you had just described about the issues of doing it hybrid, and I can see now physically the logistics are a real issue. So thanks for asking.
I guess I'll go. I'm on the same page with John. I'm comfortable. I'm very comfortable with doing it virtually, and I can see how there's a complexity, and what we do is sometimes controversial, and adding screening people for whether they're vaccinated or not, or just letting anybody in when they without that kind of screening there's an added layer of contentiousness that could come along with that. So yeah, I vote for virtual.
Commissioner Dick, you had your physical hand up.
My physical hand up, yeah. I hit it and it didn't go. I'm fully vaccinated. I've had my booster, my flu shots. I'm comfortable meeting with our team, but I agree with President Hu that when you have people coming in that you don't know, it puts people at risk. And myself, I have really bad asthma, so I would be voting for virtual in this case with the new variant that has reared its ugly head.
I'd call in or our public to feel more comfortable, or if there was a way to get their face on our screen, if available to them, if technology allowed for them. I think that there's a huge disconnect when we don't get to see facial expressions and passionate passion, and you can hear it sometimes, but you don't see it. I'm not sure how to make that engagement piece better, but I do honor that, and I'm glad you mentioned it, that it is a problem. I will come if we're in person and mask up, but I would prefer at this time to remain virtual.
Keelan, is there a way to make people appear on the caller appear on video without giving them a link, or that would just open up a whole can of worms?
Right now, that would open up a whole can of worms. So yeah, so the background, we are actively exploring options and have been all along. Microsoft has been making changes to Teams on a weekly basis, including the ones that bit us last meeting. But they have announced a feature called webinars, which on paper looks like it would allow us to allow some control over third-party guests to be able to do video. Right now, they say they've started to roll it out in November. I think they just made it by a day or two, so we have not seen it. We've been checking pretty much every day. We've been looking to see if that feature hit us yet. It has not. So until it hits us, we won't know for sure how feasible it will be for something like this. But I am very hopeful it will be. So I can't make any promises, but we are actively looking for that. Yes, because yeah, same thing. I would love to use it for council as well, because I think it would be a better experience. But with the current setup, we have no ability to turn off a camera or to force somebody's microphone off. So that would be the problem, is that if the link is out there, we would have no ability to make sure that we can maintain control over the rest of the meeting. But with this webinar feature, we are supposed to be able to do that on paper. So we'll see what it looks like in person.
Excellent. Thank you.
No problem.
Seems like everybody wants to continue the virtual meeting.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too. I think not everyone chimed in. Is there anybody who hasn't chimed in yet that wants to express their opinion?
Sure, I'll chime in quickly. You know, the great thing about the virtual meetings is that everybody does get to participate very easily, and everybody's gotten much better at doing them, right? I think that the people are a lot more comfortable being in this situation these days. So they're way better today than when we first started all this. I'm just in that group that would really prefer it to be over, and I'm sure that would be a unanimous decision if we were to vote on that. I was really looking forward to getting together in person, because also with your fellow commissioners, if you feel like, hey, I know what Miranda's opinion is, and I might want to talk to her about that in the when the commissioners are discussing, and it's just a little bit more awkward instead of turning and looking at you and saying, could you tell me what you mean by that? Or it's just a little bit more free flowing in person. And so I think we missed something, but I think this has been a really good and functional way of continuing. And I think President Hu's done a great job. I've admired the way you've managed it. You've done a really good job. So I don't like it, but I think it's wise to go along with it. How's that? Moderate to negative? Is that what how are we saying it tonight?
Nate?
Yeah, I don't have anything too particular to add that hasn't already been said, but I'm perfectly happy continuing with remote. Maybe less of a preference for it than some of the commissioners have expressed, but I'm perfectly fine with it. And for me, and I had actually thought a little bit about this beforehand, I really struggled also to see how a hybrid meeting would even work. So I think that's a good call not to pursue that route.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, everybody. I'll be continuing to talk with Keelan, and I are actually meeting in the council chamber tomorrow to kind of look at logistics, and I will continue to talk with our facilities and management and IT folks. But I'm going to recommend that we continue planning commission meetings virtually into the near future. So appreciate that. And I think that's it for tonight. Sometimes I go through sometimes I go through the schedule, but you have the rolling calendar, and we're getting kind of late. So
Sounds good. All right. As always, thank you so much, everybody, for your participation, for your service to the city. I guess we'll have another one in 7 days. So see you soon. Have a good night. Meeting adjourned.
You too. Bye-bye. Have a
Take
good
care.
one. Thank you, Doreen, for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you
Dory.
bet. You know, there's a meeting next week.
That's right.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
Don't forget that.
see you
That's
again
on the
next week.
TSP.
Yeah.